So welcome everybody to Founder City. This is a multifaceted online resource for aspiring entrepreneurs, business leaders, and investors. All of this is brought to you in partnership with Betamore, as well as several of our other local entrepreneurial ecosystem. Today, we're proud to present another programming session about successful leaders all around growing and scaling your business. And hi, my name is Kathie Callahan Brady. I am CEO of Frederick's Innovative Technology Center, also known as FITCI. And today we have the pleasure of speaking with Chris Cocca. He is the founder of Sales Acceleration and Strategic Sales Solution. And here's what I know about Chris. If your company isn't scaling the way that you would like it to, or you need an outsourced sales leader, Chris is your guy. And today we get the pleasure of one of his talks that he gives to really the top level CEOs at Vistage. He gave me several of his presentations and allowed me to choose several of the topics. So today Chris is going to be discussing the top sales trends as well as sales stories. And so without further ado, I'm going to turn this over to Chris. And Chris, thank you so much for this presentation, and the floor is all yours.
All right, thank you, Kathie. I will go ahead and share my screen, but it's great to be with you. I really appreciate the invitation today to talk to the audience, and hopefully we'll have some good information that we can share.
Absolutely.
So let me go ahead and share my screen here. All right, is that visible to everyone?
Perfect.
All right, great. So we'll get started. So again, Kathie, what you asked me to put together is a combination of how we go about telling our sales story and the best way to communicate with our customers and our prospects, and even within our own organization and company. And then what are the recent sales trends coming out of a very crazy year? It's still crazy, but certainly was in 2020. And I want to share some of the trends that we've seen out there from CEOs that we talk to on a regular basis. So a little bit more about me. Again, my company is Strategic Sales Solutions. I work predominantly with small and mid-sized business owners, including some startups or early stage companies, to help them reach their goals. My goal is to drive sales success and organizational growth for my clients. And I have a ton of great clients that I work with across all different types of industries, some family owned, some partnerships, all great business owners and great organizations that I get to work with every day. And then most importantly, I'm dedicated to leaving a legacy in the community and making a difference locally. Down at the bottom is kind of my journey, starting with public accounting, and then found a love for sales at PepsiCo and was able to get to a sales leadership position. And I've been a sales leader now for over 20 years, working in some really big companies, but then taking everything I learned down to the local level and down to smaller companies. And then as you talked about, I'm part of Sales Acceleration, which for those that don't know it, aren't familiar with it, it's the largest group of fractional sales leaders in the country. So that's a little bit about me. So what are we going to talk about today? Why would you use sales stories? Everybody here's pitching all the time. You coach people to do their pitch. You talk about pitches. So why not just do that? Why use sales stories? And then, okay, I want to use a sales story. How do I do it? What's the framework? How do I use it? And then we're going to talk about sales trends that are impacting growth in the market today. So I love this quote from Steve Clayton, who is the chief storyteller at Microsoft, which sounds like a really cool job. I'm not sure how to get that job, but it sounds like a great job. And Steve talks about how it's easy to slip into celebrating yourself and celebrating your product, but it really is a lot more rewarding to find stories of where your products or related services actually have an impact. That's really where you really set yourself apart from all of your competition. And so the first part that we'll cover is, in order, and my belief, Kathie, is in order to be customer centric, you really need to be good at telling a sales story or your sales story. And so I believe that telling an authentic sales story is your best sales weapon. And the best salespeople, including owners of companies, use stories to connect with prospects. Stories avoid pushback and ease complex sales. And I'm sure Kathie and a lot of the companies that you work with, what they're selling and the technology that they're selling is fairly complex. It's kind of hard to describe, hard to understand. And stories are a way to break down those barriers and make it a little less technical and a little bit more personable and a little bit more of a emotional connection versus just a facts and related data type connection. I believe stories resonate and are more memorable, and the data proves it, that if somebody tells you a story versus pitching, you're going to remember the story at a much higher level of detail than you're going to remember a pitch. And then I think stories build rapport and trust with prospects because they're personal. You're telling a story about somebody that's very similar to the prospect that you're talking to. And that's a way to kind of gain their trust early, which is very difficult to do early in the sales process and early in the process with, you know, trying to develop your business with a prospect or a client. So any questions, any comments so far, Kathie? Anything that grabbed you there before we get into the details?
No, all good points. It sounds very relationship based versus the
It
old
is.
ways of trying to sell things, which was extremely uncomfortable and you couldn't wait to get away from them.
Yeah, and everybody has the reputation of the salesperson, the pushy salesperson, right? And you don't want to be that, especially as an owner. You don't want to be known as the pushy sales owner. So I think this is a way to kind of make it a little bit more personable and a little bit easier for you and really for your organization, because even if you're an owner that's selling, you have other employees that are also selling. And it's good for everybody to be able to use these stories with prospects.
And it's so true. Everybody loves a good story.
Yeah, and that's a great segue. So Hollywood and even your bedtime stories are all memorable hero stories. All the Disney stories are hero stories. They're all hero stories. And it's all about the hero and the guide. And so that's a great Star Wars picture of Luke and Yoda. And too often, Kathie, people tell the story from the perspective of Luke, where they're the hero, right? I'm going to tell you about my hero story. Here's what I do. Here's why I'm great. Here's what my product or my service does for you. And here's why you need to do business with me. But this is a little bit more nuanced. This is really telling the story through Yoda's eyes, where you are the guide in the story and your client is the hero. So it flips the typical story upside down. You're not the hero, you're the guide. You want to get your customer, who's the hero, through their journey and get them to that hero status inside their company or inside their organization that they're looking for, and get them out of the pain and the issue that they're feeling, and helping them, you know, kind of navigate all of this difficult terrain that we have out there every day in our business world and in our company world. So really, it's more about telling the story from being Yoda than it would be for being Luke. And so what does that look like in a very simple framework, and how do you build it? So you want to tell a series of events that are interesting and unpredictable. You don't want to be boring. It needs to happen to a character, and the character in the story is your customer. And you need to make a business point and a personal impact. It isn't just about what you did to help your customer gain better results in their business. It's more about what did you personally do for your customer to help them, not just from a company standpoint, but from an individual standpoint. And so there are 3 building blocks to telling a compelling sales story. One is, what customer issues did you address, your pain or problems that you helped solve? Another is what you do, which sounds pretty fundamental, but you'd be surprised that people don't do a very good job of talking about what they do. And then maybe equally important are differentiators. So you want to tell a story that stands out. And if you can tell it in a way that shows how you're different and how you're different as a guide in the story and why you're unique versus other stories that would be out there, it's going to be more memorable because they're going to remember the things that are different about you and how you help that customer. And so the framework, it's really tension and time. So you start the story at the beginning. How did you meet your customer? Where were they at? What were they doing? Then you want to build a little drama or tension, which every good story has. So what's the pain? What's the struggle? Why did they choose to work with you? What did they need? Where did they need to go? Then you're going to talk about the turning point, which is you working hand in hand as a guide with your hero client to get them to turn the corner on whatever problem they were facing. What did you do to help them? What was your solution? What did it do for them? And then ultimately, what was the resolution? And it isn't just about facts and figures. It's about status. It's about pride. It's about recognition. It's about where that client ended up getting to because of the work that you did for them. What did you do for them? Because ultimately, one of the things I've learned in 20 plus years in sales is people buy on emotions first and facts second. You think that it's all facts and data, and it's very important. You can't sell without facts and data, but they buy on emotion first. And this is a way to really make an emotional tie to them. And the other thing that's really prevalent in buying is the buyer wants to know what's in it for them, not just what's in it for their company, but what is this going to do for me? And so I think storytelling really helps them resonate with what it did for the hero in the story, and then how they can identify with that hero to understand what it would do for them. So there's a couple of ways to do that. One is a founder story, which I think is really important for all of your FITCI people out there. They've got to be able to tell a really good story with their audience about how they founded the company, why they founded the company, where they are, and more importantly, where they're going. And so that's a little bit of a different story. The story that I was referring to, which every company needs to have, is a hero story, which you're differentiating yourself with the client as a hero. And we'll talk a little bit more about some key points there as well. So any questions so far, or does it make sense to you? Does it seem logical to you?
It makes sense, and it seems pretty logical. You know, years ago, they most of the sales leaders talk about the customer's pain, but they didn't do it in this way. This was not something where, and they talked a lot about make sure that you identify what's in it for them, but they were really talking about the company and not
Right.
emotionally what's in it for that specific person they're talking to. So you're going to a different depth that most people don't go to.
Yeah, and hopefully that different depth will get you further in terms of the way that you connect with the person that you're telling the story to.
Yeah, I think that's
That's what you hope.
Yeah, it's very authentic.
And I'll say that this story, you know, is only going to be told. It would be maybe a minute and a half. So this isn't a 10-minute story. This is a minute and a half, because you can only hold somebody's attention so long. So you want to tell a really interesting story, that you want to be, you want to be timely with it and be able to tell that story in a minute and a half to maybe 2 minutes.
Got it.
And so here's a great example of a tech company that's not been around very long. I don't know if you've heard of these guys in Baltimore. They're called Sales Boomerang, and they have a really cool technology that they work with mortgage lenders. And their tagline is "No borrower left behind." So when I got to them, they were really struggling with their message. And so the founder was doing all the selling in his voice. So only he could tell whatever story he was trying to tell. Nobody else could do it the way that he did it. And then there was no consistent message from the sales team. So everybody did it their own way. They needed to build a story and a process that could be replicated, because they were scaling their business. They were adding all of these business development reps, and they needed a systematic and consistent way to tell their story every day to every prospect and every client. So I worked with them and did a sales story workshop, which is the way that we build the story with all the company executives. And then we created a headline for the story. And the headline is, "We tell mortgage lenders when someone is ready for a loan." It's really simple to understand. When you tell a mortgage lender that, they're like, "That's great, because I don't know when someone's ready for a loan. If you can tell me with your technology when somebody's ready for a loan, that's a great story to tell." So we focused on client pain, and we created a client hero story of a mortgage lender that needed this badly and that was really struggling. And then we rework their demos. So I'm sure you work with clients that have software demos, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
And we wanted to make sure that we incorporated both the sales story and some problem discovery. And we're going to talk a little bit more about why discovery is such a big deal a little bit later. And that really made their demo pop. It made their demo a lot more interesting than the standard demo, because everybody's been through 1,000 software demos. If you can tell a story while you're doing the demo, it's just a lot more interesting and it's going to stick. And so, what are the keys to success in the sales story? First, it needs to be compelling, differentiated, and customer focused. Those stories are essential to success in selling. Your story should not be all about you and what you do. Your customer is the hero, you're the guide. And your sales story should be what you can do for your clients and the impact that you can make on them. So those are the keys to success in telling great sales stories. And then sales stories should be tailored to your buyer personas, and we're going to talk a little bit about that next. So your sales stories are also tied to your sales strategy. So every great company has a great sales strategy. And so if you've got a good sales strategy, you've got to understand what your sales guiding principles are. And what that means is, who are your ideal customers? What is your ideal business that you want? And how is your brand viewed in the market? So you need to really understand all those things. And that's hard as a startup, but you really need to understand all those things so that as you're out pursuing business, you've got this guideline on who you really want to attract and do business with and who you don't. Because that's the mistake that a lot of startups and young companies make, is they think, I want to work with everybody and anybody I can work with. I'll take any business. I just need revenue. I need to scale my business. And then what happens is you start working with people that are really not a good fit for you. They bog your business down, and then it allows you less time to work with ideal clients that you really do great work with. So there's got to be some level of thought into what your sales guiding principles are. And a lot of young businesses don't really have that guideline to work with. So what market segments would you like to sell into, and what are your 3-year goals? Again, it's getting real granular on, where are my targets, what are my markets, and then how am I going to grow over a 3-year time frame, and where's that growth going to come from? If I sell 5 different things, what's the mix of those 5 things that are going to contribute to growth over 3 years based on the trends in the industry and based on the trends with my clients? Where is that growth going to come from, and where do I need to be focused? What sales pipeline is required to meet your goals? Really, very few people know the answer to this, but you need to know it. So how many leads do I need? How many meetings do I need to be having with prospects? How many proposals do I need a month? How many contracts do I need a month in order for me to hit my long-term goals? So it's really just a math equation. You've heard, Kathie, of the sales funnel, where you've got the top of the funnel are leads and the bottom funnel are customers that you capture. What's the data in between, that if you track it the right way through a CRM like Salesforce, you're going to know whether you're on track or off track to hit your revenue goals, where most companies don't know whether they're on track or off track to hit their revenue goals until it's too late. They don't realize that they don't have enough leads, or they didn't do enough proposals, because they don't have the math, and they're not really viewing it that way. So they're constantly in scramble mode because they're not hitting their number, and they don't understand why they're not hitting their number. Who is the buyer, and what are your key buyer personas? So that goes back to the stories, Kathie, that like probably with a lot of your clients and a lot of your startups, they're selling to CTOs or CIOs. They're selling to CEOs or owners, or they may be selling to CFOs. Those are three really different buyer personas. So when you're building these hero stories, you're actually going to build a hero story for each buyer persona, so that when you're talking to an owner, you're telling an owner hero story. When you're talking to a chief technology officer, you're telling a chief technology officer story. So it's a one-to-one. It relates to them because they have different needs, they have different pain points, they have different incentives, they have different jobs. So you can't just tell a generic story. It needs to be tailored to your audience. And so if you've got 5 buyer personas, you need 5 stories. If you've got 3, you need 3, at least 3, if not more than that. And it takes a little while to develop those stories. There's a process involved, and it can be done, but it's not snap your finger and suddenly you have all of your sales stories for your buyer personas. Does that make sense?
It does. I'm sitting here thinking it's a lot of work, and how long does it actually take?
It does take a while. There are ways to do it efficiently, but it does take a little while to build them and then really groove them and rehearse them and use them so that you can learn from the feedback that you get and sharpen it, and make tweaks to it as you go. What is your unique value proposition? So that's a phrase that really probably is overused, but I want to talk just a little bit about that. So value versus superior value versus unique value. Everybody has a value proposition, and your value proposition simply is, why is somebody willing to pay you X for what you do? You're providing some level of value, and in return, they're paying you a rate for that value. Everybody has a value, but a superior value would be, I do this at a value that's higher than most of my competitors. I do things better than my competitors. A unique value is, I do things that my competitors can't touch. They can't do this. It's proprietary technology, it's service, it is the way that we deliver and service our customers, the way we onboard our customers. Nobody in the industry can touch us. That is really what you've got to get to. You've got to get to a level of unique value. And then when you do that unique value, then you're going to really understand, what are your differentiators, and what is your competition, and what do they do that you don't do, or what do they do that you do better. So it's really important to understand your competition, because they're out there telling a story. They're out there talking about their unique value proposition. You need to be able to talk about yours in a way and tell your story in a way that separates you from them, because they're going to hear, and luckily for you, they're probably not going to be telling a great sales story because nobody taught them how to do it, but they are going to be pitching, and they are going to be talking about their company. So you've really got to be able to differentiate yourself and put those differentiators into your story. So if one of your differentiators is onboarding, you do an amazing job with onboarding, based on your technology that you're selling. You've got to be able to go in then and weave that into the story so that they remember, oh, this was such a cool story, and man, the onboarding was such a key part of that story, and gosh, I've had such a bad experience with onboarding. I really would love to have a great experience with onboarding. Maybe this company can do it for me because they told such a cool story, and I really remembered it, and it really made its mark on me, because I know that I need that as well. And so that's the transition out of sales story and sales strategy. So I took what normally takes me 3 to 4 hours in Vistage and boiled it down to a very top line level. But hopefully the audience kind of gets the gist of what they would need to do and how they would approach it. And I would be happy to help in any way that I can. I believe that you've got to give back to the community and give back to companies, and you've got to help them be successful, and then what you do for people comes back to you. So I'm happy to help in any way that I can.
Well, thank you, Chris. I appreciate it. All of these topics that you talked about, I don't know how many startups that I work with would admit to it, but they struggle with this, understanding, their value proposition is very difficult for many of them. I don't know if it's because they're just not spending a lot of time understanding their customer, their key buyer personas. All of those are very challenging to actually do. but all critical. So you're kind of preaching to the choir here. It gets
Well,
me
good.
excited to think about it. I'd love for you to do a workshop.
Sure, I'd be happy to do that for you. So what are the sales trends that are impacting growth? The good thing about working with sales acceleration is we've got a lot of data from hundreds, if not thousands of companies that share data with us in terms of where they're strong and where they're weak in their sales function. So these are the rankings in 4 key sales areas, and I'll just kind of cover them one by one. So 88% of companies that we survey struggle with sales strategy, stuff that we talked about. How am I positioning myself in the industry? Who are my competitors and what's my value proposition? So they struggle with that. Even more struggle with sales methodology. So do I have territories carved out for my sales team? If I have a sales team, what's my coverage? What are my sales processes? So, Kathie, the vast majority of young companies or smaller companies do not have a sales process. They just do it how they do it. There's no steps, there's no stages, there's no understanding of how you get from A to B to C to D to close. And the better that you document that and understand that, the more you're going to be able to fine tune it to really understand where am I going right and wrong. And the data will help guide you on what you need to change to convert at a higher and higher level as time goes on. And then you need a good CRM. And I would tell you that most companies that you're dealing with, Kathie, Salesforce is great. And somebody may want to kill me for saying this, but 95% of those companies do not need Salesforce. It's way overkill. There are other great CRMs out there that are a little bit easier and a little bit more user friendly, and they're not as expensive as Salesforce.
And easier to
Yes,
implement too.
and easier to implement. I'm sure you've dealt with that. So for companies that need Salesforce, there's nothing better than Salesforce. But I don't think a lot of companies need Salesforce. It's just too much. Now, once you become, maybe a 50 to $100 million company, okay, you've got a complex organization. You're doing a lot of marketing and a lot of other activities. You're tying it to other ERP systems. Then yes, but until you get there, probably not. And then the next section, 89% struggle with sales analysis. So what goals am I setting for my company? What are my quotas for my sales team? What are my KPIs and metrics? What kind of reports do I use? How am I compensating my sales people or people that at least are contributing to sales? What level of incentives am I offering? Many companies struggle with all of those things because they just have not done them before. And then last, organization. So how am I staffed on the sales side? Who am I hiring? What am I doing for training? Are my roles and responsibilities clear? And the biggest gap I see there, Kathie, is with performance management. So they hire a couple of salespeople and they have no idea how to manage their performance. It's just scary. They're like, just let we don't even want to know. Just let the salespeople go deliver revenue for us. And as long as the numbers are good, we're good. And you just can't run an organization that way. Salespeople don't run well that way. They need management and leadership. They need coaching. They need review performance reviews. They need all that to get better. And so there are ways to do it. And I help companies figure that out. But a lot of companies struggle with that across their whole organization, let alone within any kind of sales function that they have.
These numbers are mind-boggling how high they are.
They really are. And you would look at this and you would say, there's no way. And then I survey companies on a very regular basis, and these are the numbers that I see.
Well, I work with clients on the sales strategy piece. That's what we spend a lot of time on, is positioning and value proposition, competitors, those types of things. And I would agree, they are that high.
Yeah, it's unfortunate, but they can be fixed. There are things that you can do to fix it.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of companies just don't understand how. They just don't have the knowledge or the expertise to do it because nobody's done it. And so the number one sales opportunity and why companies fail in the sales funnel is they do a really terrible job with discovery. They do a great job with pitching and doing a sales demo and a sales meeting, and they do a terrible job with discovery. So poor and inconsistent prospect and client discovery meetings are the biggest reason why business is not won. Most companies don't have a standard discovery process. They just sort of wing it, which is scary. And then that discovery process would be a part of the overall sales process that we talked about that also needs to be documented. So there are three ways to identify value during discovery when you're in front of a prospect and you're doing discovery. One is research. So you've got to understand the organization, the individuals that you're meeting with before you walk in the room. Common sense, but you'd be surprised. Second, practice active listening, which most of us are not very good at. And that's critical to building trust. You know, the rule of thumb in a discovery is if you're talking more than 20 or 30% of the time during that meeting, it is a big problem. And salespeople love to talk. They would love nothing than to talk 95% of the time and have people just nod their heads at them the whole time and go, yes, yes, yes. It's not the way it works. You're not going to sell very much doing it that way. So ask high impact questions. They need to be open-ended. You need to allow space for emotion. Again, we talked about the emotional thing, and probe deeper. And so some examples are, tell me more about that, or what's changing in your business, or how does that impact you? Like, what does that actually, I understand what that does to the company, but what does that do to you? And you'll be surprised what you learn. And then you'll be able to take everything that you learn and build the right proposal. Because without that knowledge, you're going to build a proposal that probably isn't a fit for your client. So does that make sense to you? Do you think that there's some truth to that, or have you seen that you know, people that you work with are really great at discovery?
Oh my God. You know, this is the number one thing that we work on with our 12-week accelerator. It's all customer discovery. And and the entrepreneurs absolutely hate it. And I get it. I do as well. But going out and having these discovery questions and interviews and conversations, they just don't like doing.
And
And
yeah, and it's if
so,
there's no shortcut though, there's
yeah,
no shortcut. You may not like it, but there's only one way to get to consistently closing business. You've got to be really good at discovery. And if you're not good at it, then hire a sales rep that's good at it. Because that's probably one of the breaking points for bringing in a sales rep, is that owners struggle so much in this area because they're just not wired that way, that in order to really scale the business, they have to start bringing on salespeople, because that's all salespeople do. The good ones, there are a lot of bad ones out there, but the really good ones are all really great at discovery. So that would definitely be a trigger point for consideration of bringing in a salesperson. And then another thing that we discovered in all of these surveys is that purpose and value-driven organizations outperform the market by 15 to 1, and they outperform comparison companies by 6 to 1. And 84% of companies are not clearly articulating their unique value proposition to clients and prospects. So I think that being purpose and value-driven is important. And I think weaving that into your unique value proposition is also important, because they want to know who they're buying from. They want to know why they should buy from you, what your company's all about, what you're all about, how you treat your employees, all of those things, because they want to know what their experience is going to be if they work with you. Right? They want to know a sneak preview of, hey, if I decide to work with your organization, am I going to like it? Am I going to align with your values? Do you know your values? Can you tell me your values? Right? And values are not just a poster on a wall. They are the way that your employees interact internally and externally every day. That your employees are either living the values, or you don't have well-defined values. So that's a big thing that I think companies all strive for it, but I think that companies fail to integrate it the right way into their messaging and their unique value proposition. and they may be uncomfortable talking about it, but people want to hear about it, especially younger buyers. All younger buyers want to hear about it, because that's important to them. They want to know that they're working with a good company.
Makes a lot of sense.
And so a couple more quick tidbits. So 73% of small and mid-sized companies rank themselves poorly in managing their team and their processes effectively on the sales side. So 73% give themselves a poor rating, few to no sales infrastructure components in place, and an additional 23% are below average, where they have basic components in place, but nothing more. And only 3 to 4% are excellent or even average. So this is where a lot of companies struggle, because they don't have the right foundational pieces in place to take their great product and their great company and their great solution and actually execute against it in the market. There's just nothing to hold it down. And then what happens, Kathie, is they run out and they do a bunch of sales training. They go hire somebody to do sales training, but then there's nothing to stick it to. There's no process, there's no system, there's no performance management. And then they wonder a year later why the sales training didn't work. Well, I could tell you it wasn't going to work before you even did it, because first things first, you've got to do all this infrastructure stuff first, and then you invest in sales training, because then you'll get a return on investment if the sales training's good. And I see them do exactly the opposite. They do the CRM before they do the sales process, and they do the sales training before they do performance management and before they have a system in place. So everything is sort of backwards, because somebody told them, hey, you got to go buy sales training for your team. Well, yeah, maybe, but you've got it. First things first, you've got to do the sales process, and the performance management system has to come first.
Then where do your goals and your metrics and your KPIs come in?
They would absolutely before sales training. All of that's part of the infrastructure. You've got to have all that so that you then can do the sales training and measure the impact on the KPI scores. You'll know whether the sales training is working, because you've got these KPIs and you've got measurements, you've got a baseline, you bring in sales training, did all those levels go up? Yes or no? So then to kind of close it, the top 10 areas companies need help in, and this is from all these thousands of surveys and what I've learned from my clients. 90% don't provide any structured onboarding. I'm going to a client on Thursday that's a roofing company, and they do no onboarding for their sales team. 90% don't have a good understanding of how likely they are to close a sale. I just had a talk with a healthcare services provider, and they're clueless on how likely they are to close a sale for anything that's in their pipeline.
Wow.
90% don't have a sales process that is followed, much less documented. 90% have not tested their hypothesis on the markets they need to serve. They haven't done any level of market research. 91% don't have individual sales rep quotas if they've got salespeople, or if they've got 3 owners that are selling, they don't have quotas. 91% don't know if sales training is effective, which is sad. 92% don't consider ROI when deciding where to spend their marketing budget. They just start throwing money into Google ads or into their website or whatever, and they're not really measuring how well those funds are paying back for them. 92% report there is no sales process, therefore it isn't understood by anybody. 94% typically don't do much training. So if they do the training, they don't know whether it works, but most are not doing a lot of training. And then 97% have not done a thorough analysis of their competition, which is shocking but true. I've yet to work with any client that has done a thorough competitive analysis. Nobody. And it's essential, because how are you going to talk about your differentiators and your sales story if you don't know your competition? You can't do it.
So I have 2 thoughts on this. One, I'd love to know look at a thorough analysis of your competition, just to see what you think that looks like. The other thing I look at when I look at all these numbers, and I go back to your other one, it was 88, 93, it was all in the high 80s, close to 90s. I got to rethink why businesses fail. Seriously, I mean, when I look at some of these things and you go back and you look at why businesses fail, if they're all this high and the majority of businesses are struggling in the sales area, maybe that's the reason why. Because if you're not selling, you're failing.
Yeah, it's the lifeblood. You really can't, you're going to burn through a lot of cash really quickly if you're not scaling your revenue and bring in profitable growth along the way, right? You're learning and becoming more efficient and more profitable with all the new deals that are coming in and getting smarter about who you're dealing with. So yeah, this has got to be, I guess if you go back and reverse engineer companies that have failed, you probably could go back and point to a lot of these things and say, well, they didn't have any of this stuff. Maybe there were other reasons they failed. I mean, if they've got a poor product or a poor technology or poor delivery of their technology and they can't stand by what they sell, then it doesn't matter how great you are at selling, you're going to crash and burn. But if you've got a really good a really good product or service and you're really good at delivering it to your clients, then you've got to have this to really be great. And a lot of people are throwing money at the problem, so they're bringing in salespeople thinking that they're going to be the solution to the problem, not realizing that they've created an atmosphere where no salesperson can be successful. So they wonder why they churn salespeople. Oh, I brought in a salesperson and I paid them all this money and they only sold one deal in a year. And then I had to let them go and it was just a big waste of money. Well, yeah, well, let's dig a little deeper on what environment did you put the salesperson into? And did you really expect them to be successful? Or were you setting them up for failure? Right. So before you bring on salesperson number one for a lot of these companies, you've got to figure all this stuff out first. Don't even attempt to bring on a new salesperson until you've done the majority of this stuff, because you will fail and it's really expensive. Salespeople are not cheap. Good salespeople are really not cheap. So you can't afford to, you only have so much cash and so much capital to invest. You can't afford to make a mistake on somebody that should be earning $120,000 to $200,000 a year if they're selling at quota.
Wow. So if there's a company out there and they wanted to work with you, Chris, and there's they need to start from the very beginning. How long do you spend with them, and what would they actually expect? Because there's a lot to this, and there's a tremendous amount that you would have to go through. Um, how long would they expect to work with you?
It is typically a 4-month process.
Wow. Okay.
So it takes 4 months, and we do it a piece at a time, where we're not trying to do too much all at once.
Mm-hmm.
And the way that I work, I'm not sure how others work, but the way that I work is I'll do the analysis up front, and then I'll really understand what they're telling me are weaknesses. So maybe some of the things we talked about, they're doing really well and they don't need help in.
Mm-hmm.
And then I build a scope of work that addresses all of the weaknesses. And so I'm paid for delivering a scope of work. I'm paid for helping them build sales stories. I'm paid for helping them to document and build a sales process and get the CRM off the ground and start forecasting properly. I'm paid to do sales comp plans and onboarding of salespeople. I'm paid for all of these things because I'm telling them, if you do these things, you're going to solve all of these gaps and weaknesses that you've already told me that you have. And then once you lay that foundation, now you're going to be able to consistently grow your business.
I get it. So if there's a company out there and they need a place to start and they need the do-it-yourself sort of version, is there a book that you would recommend, or a class that you would recommend, or something along those lines?
I do workshops from time to time that would just take pieces of this and put it into a workshop. And I do those workshops on demand. So if I've got 3 or 4 business owners that want to do a sales process workshop, then I'll do that. If they want to do a sales story workshop, or a strategy workshop, I'll do that. So that's probably the easiest way. But I do that only when there's a demand for it, because my preference is to work one-on-one with clients and go deeper, but happy to do workshops as well. Book, there's no book on most of this. The only book that I would say comes closest to a piece of this is for the sales story. There's a book called Building a Story Brand by Donald Miller. And he's I'm sure most people that have done Vistage have heard something about Donald Miller. And so most of his philosophy is what I use to build sales stories. So that's a great book to read. Another great book to read on building your business and building a systematic way for your leadership team to operate that I work with organizations on is called Traction. And I think you've heard a little bit about that. EOS is the group that helps with Traction, but Traction is by Gino Wickman. And that's a book that anybody can buy and read and self-implement. You won't be as good self-implementing as if you have, a consultant or a professional implementer to help you, but there's nothing stopping you from self-implementing if you don't have funds for a consultant or an implementer. And it works. It's a great system. It's fairly easy. And it really helps you get your leadership team square on how you need to be operating every week.
And it's an excellent book, that's for sure. I would think the storytelling would be probably the hardest one to implement on your own.
It is. You almost need an outsider to kind of help be your guide through the process and help you. There are ways to do it and ways to kind of capture the voice of the customer in this that most companies are just not naturally good at. I got back from a client that I'm working with a few interviews that I asked them to do so we could start building these stories. And I got back the interview and I'm like, oh, it's just not enough. We're not asking the right questions. We're not getting the right information, because far too often when we even attempt to tell a story, it's going to be from our voice and what we believe and not necessarily what the customer believes.
I get it. Yeah, I completely do understand that. Well, thank you so much. This is really valuable information. I really appreciate it. Appreciate your time. I know how busy you are.
Yep, happy to. And anybody can reach out to me anytime on LinkedIn, or go, any help that they need, they can message me on LinkedIn. I'm pretty easy to get a hold of. And you've got my contact information if anybody wants to contact you to get introduced to me. Like I said, I'm happy to help. I really do want to make an impact with companies and communities that I serve in Maryland.
Well, you do. You already have, and I know you will in the future. So again, thank you so much, Chris. I really appreciate it.
All right.
Hey guys, thank you for being a part of Founder City. All of this is happening on foundercity.com. And while our Maryland founders are out there, they're starting to prepare to pitch their videos. And all of this is an opportunity to determine who is going to be Maryland's best founder company. So stay tuned for all of that and have a great evening.
Thank you, Kathie.
Thank you.